Hey folks, Nick here from another BookTube channel. Today looking at a very strange artifact. This is Spirit World #1. This is a magazine that is written mostly, drawn mostly, and edited, I believe, primarily by Jack Kirby, the Jack Kirby, the one and only. This is a weird one. This is something that he did for DC Comics when he jumped ship from Marvel to DC at the end of the 60s. Apparently, I wasn't able to find too much information, although, honestly, I didn't look too hard, but I wasn't able to find too much information about the genesis of this project and the magazines that he did for DC. But from what I saw, this was his idea. This was a Jack Kirby creation through and through. And it didn't turn out the way that he wanted, which basically is like the theme for everything he did at DC. But along with kind of bringing the fourth world to DC, which we see now as a huge success, he also wanted to work on some magazines that were more geared toward adults. Spirit World was one of them. The more popular one, the more well-known one, is the In the Days of the Mob, which I've seen YouTube videos on before, and that's a great one too. But I don't really see much about Spirit World, and after reading through it, I can't say that I'm surprised. I don't know what to make of this. Calling it a good magazine doesn't feel right because it's so bizarre and it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But also, I've never seen anything like it, and I gotta tip my hat to Jack trying to do something completely different and weird in the early 70s. It was published 1971, and you'll notice DC definitely didn't have any faith in it because they wouldn't even publish it under the DC name. They created this name Hampshire Distribution Limited, which is what both this and In the Days of the Mob were released under. So DC didn't even put their name on it, which maybe would have helped, maybe. But also, I think that they kind of saw what Jack had in mind for this, and they immediately started distancing themselves from it. I think they originally promised him like full color glossy paper. That's not what we got, as we'll see. But let's take a look at what Spirit World is all about. We get a really interesting cover. Front and center, we have a man with a rifle and a casket with the American flag draped over it. We have calls for reincarnation, a photo feature about forbidden rituals of secret California cults, and the ominous warning that the world will end in 1983. So we got a lot going on here for only 50 cents. Let's open up and we'll dive in. First, the main thing, editor, Jack Kirby, assistant editors, Steve Sherman and Mark Evanier, Evanier being a frequent collaborator of Kirby. And the first thing that jumps out immediately is this first page, which is not drawn, but it's photo collage. And I think that's what I probably like most about this magazine is just we get to see a great variety of techniques on display by, I assume, Kirby, because I don't know that Kirby's actually taking the photographs himself, but we saw in his Marvel work, even in Fantastic Four, he would use photo collage. So he would take maybe found photos and piece them together and make pages that kind of look like this. And he's definitely doing that again here. I would love to know more about if there was, an actual photo studio set up somewhere for DC, or if these were photos specifically for it, or if this was just him combing through magazines and kind of pasting things up. It'd be a pretty interesting thing to think about and look at and just know the history of. But in this first feature here, it's called The President Must Die. Pretty bold way to start off your magazine. I mean, you put it right on the cover. Prediction: the president must die. This is a story about the JFK assassination less than a decade after, because what, that was 1963 that happened, I think. Yeah, 1963, and this is 1971. So we are less than 10 years removed from that. And here's Jack Kirby writing a speculative fiction magazine about this woman named Lucille who predicted or foresaw the assassination of Kennedy and tried to stop it and was not able to. Which is insane. It's a crazy premise. I feel like it's a little bit what's, I don't know, it's in maybe bad taste to have done this kind of so soon after the assassination of the president, but interesting idea. Throughout the magazine, we're going to be kind of narrated to by this character here, Dr. E. Leopold Moss, and he's like the crypt keeper here. He's a parapsychologist, and he's kind of the guy who's introducing us to the stories and walking us through everything. Really? Okay. So what this magazine really reminds me of, this is maybe a deep cut. I don't know if everybody's going to remember this, but in the 90s, there was a TV show called Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction. And it was one of my favorite shows when I was a kid. And if you have, I think, Freevee in the United States, there's like an entire channel just for Beyond Belief reruns that play like 24 hours a day. And I think it ran for like 4 or 5 seasons or something like that. In the first season, the host is James Brolin, but then he wasn't so good. They replaced him with Jonathan Frakes from Star Trek. And Jonathan Frakes is incredible as the host of Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction. And he does like what this guy does, where he introduces the story, and then he says weird, funny, punny things that make you think about, like, was it fact or was it fiction? That was like the whole premise of the show, which is you watch an unbelievable story, and then at the end, they tell you if it was based on real events or not. So that's what this magazine has the vibe of. Like, this guy is Jonathan Frakes, except it doesn't have that premise of, like, is it fact or fiction? It's all fiction, but it still treats everything as though it could be fact. And that's where, like, things get confusing. We'll talk a little bit about, like, techniques here, but I mean, I don't know too well. I can't speak too much, but we've seen Kirby using photo collage already. And now from just this page, we can see him using a lot of ink wash. Everything here it's blue ink. There's no black, which is an interesting choice, but it's blue ink. And we're seeing him using thick brush lines for a lot, but he's also using a lot of thins. So different techniques, different style. I kind of am reminded of, in his clothing, like Harvey Kurtzman a little bit, and just the thick, broad strokes to denote, like, you know, drapery on clothing. But this woman here, she's trying to call the White House and say that she has seen an image of a gunman. She's seen an image of a casket with the American flag draped over it. She knows that the president is traveling. She's trying to stop them, trying to reach him before he gets on the plane. But unfortunately, it's too late. She's too late to stop them. No matter how many times she calls, the president's already on his way. I love this panel here of her screaming. We got half the Dallas sign, the airplane flying out. That's a great panel. But it's too late. She sees the gunman, and, you know, it happens. What happens, happens. And this is what I'm talking about with the ending, where our Jonathan Frakes guy says, was there a psychic... oh, no, it starts over here. Like Lucille, all of us who suffered and grieved after what followed shall never forget that terrible event. But my point is, how many of us were involved in that psychic experience? Was Lucille's call the only one made that day? Was there a psychic network operating? Was it sparked in some still undiscovered way, leaping from circuit to circuit, from individual to individual? did you make a phone call that day? And like, no, like none of this has any basis in reality. Like, why even posit the question? If it would be so much different if they actually use stories that were reported on. Like, obviously, it doesn't need to be actually real, but you know, it's the 70s. There's no Google. You can get away with like someone making up a story and having it be propagated as like a folk tale or something like that. But this isn't. There's no basis for this at all. Now we're moving on to the next story, the House of Horror, and some more photo collage. And in this story, our narrator, Dr. Moss, is actually going to this house that's supposed to be haunted, and he's mostly just dealing with the spirits there. I really like this. I looked at this for a long time because it's just an interesting. Because there's no color, like it's blue ink, but it's the blue ink and it's white, and then ink wash for the gray in between. So there's no color distinction, but you still have to denote that these are spectral figures. And so the use of white is really clever here, because everything else is filled in with an ink wash, except the area at the doorway and the areas around like the silhouette of these ghostly figures. And then inside, we can still see through them, but what we see through them is also inked a little bit differently than what we see outside of them. Very clever. I like to see Kirby doing weird stuff like this. I mean, I'm sure DC was confused as hell when they got these pages, but it's a lot of fun. I mean, if you're a Kirby fan especially, something like this is kind of a must-have in the collection because it's such a unique artifact and a unique item. But Kirby also, still knows how to frame and compose a panel. This is a great one here of our character walking in the foreground, in the background, the shadows. We have the action of these two forms tussling. Little Captain America shield cameo there. I don't know what that's supposed to be, but that's floating around in this haunted house. Our narrator guy is seeing visions, going back in time, seeing the history of the house. I don't know. Honestly, I tried reading this. It was a bit of a slog, so I'm mostly just trying to piece this together with the imagery. I think this got away from Jack a little bit. I think the ink wash was a little too heavy here. I don't think he meant to do it like quite that dark. I like this. This is like a bunch of just amorphous form of spectral figures just kind of coalescing into one big blob and chasing the guy. Pretty interesting. And then we get the house collapse. Our Jonathan Frakes escapes. The house collapses, and I guess the danger is done. And we get another one of those closings where he's asking, man is known to generate heat, electricity, and chemical action. Is there some yet unnameable byproduct generated by man and his times which outlives their passing? A product which does not go to the grave? Love it. Love how absolutely cheesy and ridiculous this is. And then we have something really interesting here. So I don't know. This is another one where, like, I wish I knew the division of labor of, like, what's being done by Kirby here. Is he writing the story? Because this is Children of the Flaming Wheel, and it is completely just a photo play. It's just photographs. I love these goofy little guys wearing silly helmets and capes. Like, I want to know, like, who are these people in these photographs? Were they employees of DC? Were they actors? Like, what did they know about what they were signing up for to be photographed for? Did Kirby write this story? This is just like, basically like flower children in California who are transcending space and time using, I imagine, psychedelics to like make contact with other spirits. There's a poster attached in the center here, which doesn't look like a very good poster, honestly. Very purple. But that's the whole story. It's just these silly little photo collages. Weird stuff. And now we have the Screaming Woman. And this is where I really like seeing this, because Jack Kirby drawing a little kind of like very curvaceous, revealing attire for women. You know, Kirby's never really known for drawing beautiful women. And, you know, he did mostly kids work. He worked on, you know, Fantastic Four and Marvel. And he did romance comics, but it was all very anesthetized. It was a different time. So this is a magazine. He's not limited by the Comics Code Authority, and he wanted to make it a little bit more adult. So you get some revealing kind of poses. We get shirts kind of opening up here. I don't know if it's just a blemish on my copy, or if it's maybe just like a piece of whiteout that got away from him. But like that straight up, like it looks like there's a nipple there. Like I don't know again if it's just my copy, but it's crazy seeing Jack Kirby drawing like almost nudity in a comic. I like this splash page here. I like the flames because it's very different than, I mean, he spent so much time drawing Fantastic Four and the Human Torch that these are not flames like anything else you've seen from Jack Kirby before. Like these look, I'm not sure how he did it, honestly. I imagine maybe some whiteout smudges or only using pencil. Like, I don't know, to like create, because it looks almost like the graphite that's not completely, like blackened the page. Like it's just interesting. It's just great technique. I would love to know how he did that. This is a story about a woman in the modern day who is having flashbacks to being a woman who was accused of being a witch during the Spanish Inquisition. And again, I looked up the name of these characters. I'm like, is this based in any reality? Is he basing this story on anything? And no, he is absolutely not. This is all just speculative. This is just made up from Kirby's mind. And it's fun, but again, it makes the magazine seem like, what is the point here? Especially with like the narrator. Like, what is his purpose? The woman in the olden days, she's looking for her lover who was on this battlefield, and the Inquisitors like see her, they blame her for the massacre, and so she goes on trial. People falsely bear witness against her, saying like, yeah, we saw her do it, she's guilty. Again, more revealing clothing. You don't see that from Kirby. More here, pushing those bosoms out, you know, Uncle Jack, hot-blooded American. But it just wraps up. I mean, our doctor is recording his sessions with the woman in the modern day, trying to get evidence that she lived a past life as this person. And that's it. That's just the whole thing. It's just like, what if someone lived a past life? This is a prose story by Steve Sherman and Mark Evanier. Skip right over that. And then we close with a story about Nostradamus. Jack Kirby gets to show off that he can draw different time period clothing, as our Jonathan Frakes character changes his outfits to denote that he's going back in time to the days of Nostradamus, who's making his predictions. More photo collage here. Get some Hitler. Why not? Well, that's relevant because the premise of this is just talking about all of the premonitions that Nostradamus had that he was right about, or, you know, right about, such as King Henry II, the assassination of Marie Antoinette, this bridge collapse, I guess. He predicted Napoleon, and of course, you know, he predicted the rise of Hitler, Khrushchev. So this is, I think, maybe also a fun way for Kirby to just explore different time periods, draw a lot of cool different styles, different faces from history. Because Kirby was a very talented artist. I mean, his comic book characters can be accused of looking very samey, but he can draw likeness very well. I've seen evidence of it. And I think he gets to show that off a little bit here. And it ends with Jonathan Frakes saying, "My advice to any future travelers is don't plan on visiting Paris in the year 1983. The big reveal that the world will end in 1983. Get the Eiffel Tower in the distance there, falling over, the Arc de Triomphe in disarray." More photo collage. So this stuff, I imagine, is you know, they're pulling from magazines or whatever to make this. So that's it. Oh, you know what? That's not it. We get one last, the back inside cover. We got Sergio Aragonés doing some weird humor, fun stuff. Sergio Aragonés is a great cartoonist. He's someone that I really want to explore more of. At my local comic shop, JHU in Staten Island, one of the co-owners there, Nick, has told me many times to read Gru by Sergio Aragonés. It's one of his favorite comics of all time, so I really should get on that. But yeah, that's Spirit World. What do you make of this? This is a wild artifact. It's a lot of fun. I can't believe I was able to find it at New York Comic Con this past year. Thanks, Jason Hamlin, for the hookup. But yeah, this is a really weird one. I love it, and I also think it is a complete failure. So yeah, a very strange one. Let me know your thoughts about it in the comments below. Thank you very much for spending some time with me today, but now it's time to get back to reading.